Ladies and gentlemen, in this RedGameNintendo.com video, we're going to be talking yet more about indie development on the PlayStation 4, the Xbox One, and the Wii U. Now, some of this is going to be going over familiar ground, but a couple of indie developers, specifically Lorne Lanning and Dean Hall, have been commenting on the state of affairs with the Xbox One and Microsoft's various policies. Now at the start we're going to focus mostly on the Xbox and PlayStation, and then we're going to talk a bit about Nintendo as well, because there have been some murmurs in Camp Nintendo, specifically on the indie game front, and that they want to actually encourage indie developers onto their system, which is always obviously a very good thing. But for now we're going to talk specifically about the PlayStation and Xbox. Now as I said, we've talked about some of this stuff before, specifically that Microsoft have a policy that most indie developers simply do not like, and that is basically that they need a publisher before they can actually put the game on the Xbox Live system. In other words, they cannot simply self-publish. Now, this obviously pisses off quite a few developers. For example, the new Oddworld, New and Tasty, will not be coming to either the Xbox 360 or the Xbox One because of this policy. In an interview at E3, Lorne Lanning, who is the boss behind this franchise, was talking about this. This is a quote: "There are those who are looking at next quarter's profits, and maybe one of those big guys looks like they're doing right now. If they are looking at the world that way, you've got obvious enormous titles. They're going to be big revenue generators. If the company's purely about profit, they're looking at those, and then they're looking at the little guys and saying, oh, they're only making this much. They're not interested. There's one party that's making it very clear they are not interested." End quote for a moment. Now, Lanning himself has been in talks with Microsoft for a long-ass time, and indeed, Stranger's Wrath HD being released on the Xbox Live was a huge saga, and he's actually spoken about this a couple of times before. He's been very outspoken and very critical about Microsoft, because he was saying that basically they spent 15 months, which, when you think about it, is a long time. It's, coming up to 1.5 years. Trying to get Stranger's Wrath HD onto Xbox Live Arcade, and then they were turned down. And now they're having basically similar issues with the new game. He states, "For Xbox One, they've granted us a license for New and Tasty, but they still say you need a publisher. We don't have a publisher, so we're not officially on the platform, even though we're compatible, even though we're ready to do it, period. Why do we need a publisher when we self-finance our games, we build our own IP, we manage our own IP, and we've turned nearly 2 million units online as indie publishers sold, not free downloads? Why? What's wrong with us? It's a different level of perspective. Is it ridiculous?" He then further goes on to say, "Who's in touch with their audience, and who seems to be out of touch with their audience? All we know is we've tried to get our games on their platform and we can't do it. And I even helped them release the box." Now, in case you guys aren't aware, Lanning himself actually helped launch the original Xbox almost 12 years ago, back in 2001. So it's not like he's not got either experience with Microsoft, A, or B, he doesn't have a history of a working relationship. So you can understand he's extremely frustrated with this. Okay, so for the time being at least, Oddworld, New and Tasty seems out for either of the Xbox current platforms, Xbox One or Xbox 360. And DayZ creator, his name is Dean Hall, is having a similar issues when it comes to a standalone version of the popular modification. Once again, he's done an interview, and I'll read a quote. "Yeah, we talked to both of them." He's obviously talking about Microsoft and Sony here. "But as I'm sure you're aware, Sony lets you self-publish and they don't make you pay for updates. Microsoft require you to have a publisher. They have no digital distribution strategy, and they require you to pay $10,000 or whatever it is for updates. We like Sony. I like what I saw on the PlayStation 4. I like what I saw on the Xbox in a lot of cases as well. And I'm not shitting on them. I'm kind of hopeful that Microsoft just forgot to talk about the indie support. Maybe I'm being a bit naive. Okay, so let's stop for a moment and analyze this. You can understand, really, why they don't want publishers. Imagine you do all the hard work for your game, okay? So in other words, you've created everything you need, and then you've self-financed, whether you've done this either through Kickstarter or whether all of you and your friends have basically working throughout the night or, after your jobs or whatever, and you're putting in all your time and cash to get this bloody game sorted out. Now, obviously, indie games now are becoming increasingly complicated. And indie games now, like Amnesia, for example, Machine for Pigs, is looking to be incredibly awesome. And it certainly rivals full releases from big publishers of just a few years ago. So, imagine, you do all of this work, you put all your blood, sweat, tears, and more importantly, your own money. That's the important part. And suddenly, you can't publish it. You're screwed. It's not like, you've got no history. It's not like you've got no product. You can publish it. You have the technology to do so. You have the digital distribution, but they are just not saying that you can do so. They will not let you. It's been fault tested. They know it works. They've even had a working relationship for you previously. More to the point, you've made money from previous products. They know that your products are popular, but you can't self-publish. What sense does that make? That's where they're coming from. Imagine that they are saying to you that you need to go through this company who've had nothing to do with you up to this point. They don't even know possibly you exist, or if you do exist, you've had no working relationship. And suddenly Microsoft is saying, okay, well, you need to contact this guy, and then he can get a split, or she can get a split of your profits, even though they did nothing for it. And there you go. Now, I know what you're going to say. Yeah, but their benefit is that you can now make money because obviously they are entitling you or enabling you to publish. But the problem is here, it's not like it's a benefit. It's no net benefit. The problem is that, well, you're basically signing away parts of your profit and possibly license issues as well, depending on what the publishers actually want. They may say to you, well, all new games must be published, all of your big games must be published through us, or even if it's just this one, it can become a whole thing. Why would you want to split profit? And Sony are here, and they're saying, well, you know what, guys? Come on to the PlayStation. We've got fun and games, and we'll even give you cookies if you sign up. So, the question is, are Microsoft going to change this policy? Phil Spencer, in another interview, was talking about the whole Xbox and self-publishing and so forth, and I'm going to read you guys out an exact quote. Is open to self-publishing and other changes and advancements in our publishing ecosystem, but I don't want to stand up and commit to things that aren't plan of record now. That would be wrong, end quote. The problem is, this is once again a huge issue because Microsoft, I really want Xbox One to succeed, and I've been very critical about them in the last couple of days on the channel, as I'm sure you guys are aware, but it's not because I don't like Microsoft as a company. I do. I even really respect what they did for the Xbox One and 360 because, to be honest with you, my personal opinion is although the PlayStation 1, the original PS1, did a ridiculous amount for console gaming and gaming as a whole, because of the popularity of both the PS1 and PS2, it brought gaming heavily into the mainstream. That's not to say that gaming wasn't going in that direction, or if Sony had not stepped in, gaming wouldn't have become big. That's obviously not what I'm saying at all, because you could have seen that it was becoming more and more lucrative. But Sony certainly seemed to propel it into the household brand name, because, let's face it, Sony was synonymous at the time with televisions and stereos and everything else. But similarly, Microsoft, of course, was synonymous with computing. More to the point, I think that they really helped bring in an age of online gaming. Now, of course, the PlayStation had online gaming. The Dreamcast had online gaming. It's just that it wasn't nowhere near to the state that, of course, we enjoy now. This generation of online gaming is ridiculously awesome for consoles, and obviously there are, still a few hiccups here and there, but for the most part, it's pretty damn smooth sailing. So I really respect what Microsoft have done, and even if I hated Microsoft, which I don't, but let's assume I was a massive Sony fanboy and I hated Nintendo, I hated Microsoft, and I thought every single game on that system was awful. Let's assume I felt like that. I still wouldn't want them to fail, because if they did, as I've said to you guys millions of times by now, it just isn't good for even Sony, because then they've got no competition. No competition means that they can basically become complacent. Another issue with this stance is because developers, I'm talking about indie developers, are less likely to publish on Xbox One. In other words, it's not to say that you won't get developers on Xbox One, but it's certainly putting them off. And bear in mind, one of the reasons for the x86/64 architecture of these next generation consoles is to encourage development and to make development easier. Because obviously, you've got the PC architecture, which is extremely easy to program for, and then you've got the awesome fun of trying to make it run on either the PS3 and Xbox 360. Now, it's certainly easier than what it was, but it's still not as easy as what it could be as what the next generation of consoles. So what my basic point is that when you're doing this, you're basically cutting off a revenue stream for indie developers. And obviously, if you're reducing, let's say, for example, and obviously this is a pure theoretical example, what would never happen in real life, but let's assume that the Xbox, PlayStation 4 and PC all accounted for 1/3 of the sales each for your indie game, okay? So let's assume that you were to shift 10,000 copies, just for example, on each of the platforms. Once again, completely hypothetical, would never happen, but let's just assume it did for the purposes of this argument. Okay, so let's assume that was to happen. That's 30,000 copies. Let's assume, however, that you were to discount the Xbox in that, because you can't get either a publisher interested, or you just don't want to go that route because you just don't want to work with a publisher for whatever reason. What happens? Well, you've only sold 20,000. My point being, it's less revenue. Now, many people have put forward the argument that it's not like we're missing anything huge. I mean, for example, we've got Minecraft on the Xbox and other titles, and it's not like they are saying, no, you cannot have any indie games on the Xbox Live. No, of course not. But it's just getting to the point where it's that extra level to go through. And honestly, Microsoft, especially with all of their talk for this whole cloud gaming and everything else, digital distribution, they should be jumping on this with open arms. They should be hugging it, because the more development that you can encourage to your console, the better. Now, obviously, there are issues with this. Primarily, quality, right? Quality of the games. Obviously, you need to make sure that they're bug-free. More to the point, you need to make sure they're good quality, because you don't want to just keep having tons of games on your system, and those games are, crap, right? Because obviously quality is not just about being bug-free, it's also, is the game good? Okay, so enough of the Xbox and PlayStation for a few minutes. We've talked about that. What about Nintendo? I did say that Nintendo have been making some strides towards becoming more open to, indies. And obviously, previously, Nintendo got some bad press, specifically on the original Wii, but even a little bit on the Wii U, of ignorance, I suppose, would be one way to put it, or at least misunderstanding of the indie developer scene, and the fact that they just weren't really supportive of it. But now they're starting to realise that this is not the case, because obviously some indie titles, they do okay, they sell to the point where they make a decent profit for both you as the developer and, say, the platform holder, in this case, for example, Nintendo or Microsoft or Sony. But then you've got the really big games, the ones that do insanely well, and we all know what they are by now, so I'm not going to bother to reel out a list of them, but obviously, I'm sure you can guess. Right now, Nintendo are reaching out to indie developers, and co-founder and president of Capybara Games, I'm hoping I pronounced that correctly, but they are behind titles such as Sword and Sorcery. He's been actually really happy with how Nintendo have been acting recently towards himself and other indies. And I'm going to read you guys out a quote. I've seen personally, firsthand, Nintendo making a big move to try and get smaller, unique independent games on Wii U downloadable. They have a really great team there. Dan Edelman, I'm hoping I've pronounced that correctly, who runs that division, is one of the raddest dudes in video games, and I would say easily one of the most respected people by independent community. Nintendo is reaching out and trying to do something. They're playing catch up, obviously, but that's a hard spot to be in when it comes to getting the new stuff, but they're really putting it in. Back late 2012, September if you want to be precise, Nintendo actually have signed a deal which allow users of the Unity engine to port their games onto the Wii U, although it does have some contingencies in there. They need to buy a license and arrange a publishing deal, but regardless, Nintendo also licensed the Unity engine for itself as well as its third-party partners. But continuing, this is a quote from David Helgeson, who is a CEO of Unity Technologies, and the quote is, Nintendo's unfettered access to Unity will produce a wealth of insanely good games from knowledgeable Nintendo developers. The Wii U development add-on will create an amazing opportunities for our massive community of developers to showcase their incredible creativity on one of the most anticipated and innovative gaming platforms to date. As a slight aside, in case you're not exactly sure what the Unity engine is, I'll quickly give you guys a guided tour. Well, guided tour is a bit strong, but it basically has about 1.2 million, shall I say. That makes it sound a bit more impressive, doesn't it? Registered users, and they are primarily indie developers, and they can use that tech for a multitude of different things, and that includes iOS, Xbox 360, as well as PlayStation 3, of course, and PC as well. Now, that isn't the end of the Nintendo tale. The developer of Trine series, Frozen Byte, is also saying his 2 pence into it, and he's basically saying that the eShop is more on par with companies such as Apple rather than the PS3 and Xbox in terms of the flexibility for the indie developers. And also that we've got a quote from the studio that is saying that it's definitely going in the right direction as far as small developers are concerned. So it's kind of an interesting state of affairs because obviously you've got Microsoft, who should be really embracing the indie scene, and they're kind of scratching their heads together and not really sure what to do. Nintendo were finally understanding that, well, we need games on our platform at some point. I mean, we've got the machine out there, so we might want to actually put some software as well. I know that was a bit of a dig, I'm sorry, but, you know. And, honestly speaking, they're actually becoming a bit more impressive. I mean, E3 showing, which I'm going to speak about in the next couple of days, because I'm going to be doing an E3 roundup of all the respective companies. I know it's a bit late, but I wanted to get all of the information on all of the interviews out first, because, as I said the other day, there are people doing like these roundups, and they were doing them on like Wednesday, and I'm like, guys, what's the point? Everything hasn't even been said yet, so I'm going to be doing probably mine tomorrow. Rather than today, because I have a few bits and bobs to do regarding the channel. But honestly speaking, Nintendo weren't too bad. Microsoft need to get their act together in terms of indie, and Sony are definitely leading the way for indie. That doesn't mean they're perfect. I'm sure that there are maybe 1 or 2 indie developers that aren't exactly 100% happy with one policy, because no one can be happy with everything that you are doing. It is impossible. Because, well, no one is perfect, or two different businesses, two different people. You always get clashes of personality or something or another, but most indie developers I've read about, in fact, I don't think I've personally read about an indie developer who've had bad issues recently with Sony, especially regarding the PS4. If that is not the case, and there are actually one or two, then please link it either in the comments below, or better still, if you can go to facebook.com/RedGamingTech and you can leave a message on either the wall or whatever. You can message me as well. That would be swell, because I'm curious if there are actually any recent comments, so within the last couple of months of any, or should I say since the PS4 has been announced. Anyway, I think that just about does it. So we've gone over some familiar ground, but we've got some new perspectives, which is always good, because new understanding is the hallmark of knowledge, or something, I don't know. Anyway, I'm going to leave you guys to it. Hopefully you've enjoyed the video, and I will see you soon. Take care, and bye for now.